The Trump campaign is downplaying an expected polling surge for Vice President Kamala Harris after the Democratic National Convention. In a new memo, the campaign calls the wave of momentum seen since the vice president entered the race the Harris honeymoon. It also warns that any bump from the vice president will be short-lived. Quote, post-DNC, we will likely see another small, albeit temporary, bounce for Harris in the public polls. Post-convention bounces are a phenomenon that happens after most party conventions. These bumps do not last. The memo goes on to mention past election matchups that have seen convention bumps, such as Hillary Clinton seeing a 7-point polling lead after Trump after her convention in 2016. Meanwhile, the vice president is winning the fundraising fight as the race nears 2 months until the election. NBC News correspondent Adrienne Broaddus has more.
Let's get out there. Let's vote for it.
It's an all-out blitz to the finish line.
We must defeat Kamala Harris.
With just 72 days until the election,
there'll be time to sleep when you're dead.
The presidential campaign's kicking into high gear. Courting voters.
We need to be thinking about the future.
We're a nation in decline. Nobody is safe.
And collecting cash. Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign saying they've raised $40 million since her convention speech Thursday. Over $500 million since President Biden dropped out July 21st. It's a battle for bucks. The latest numbers for the Trump campaign, it says it raised almost $139 million in the month of July. As donations flow, so does a bank of promises. Both parties campaigning on reproductive rights.
When Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law.
On Meet the Press, Donald Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance, telling NBC's Kristen Welker that his running mate would not impose a federal ban on abortion.
So he would veto a federal abortion ban?
I think he would. He said that explicitly, that he would.
As the Harris campaign builds on the momentum of its convention success, Republicans hope to gain ground and energize their base.
And on this note, Ed, your latest op-ed for the Financial Times is titled The Astonishing Metamorphosis of Kamala Harris. And you write, in part, this. Harris's metamorphosis from indifferent vice president to the source of Obama-scale enthusiasm has caught almost everyone unawares. People did not know she had it in her. To paraphrase the adage, cometh the hour, cometh the woman. It turns out that Harris is a once-in-a-generation natural. She has also learned from the mistakes of Hillary Clinton in 2016. Though Harris would be the first woman president, and a non-white one too, her identity is not central to her campaign. Harris has unrolled a near-flawless opening to her campaign. Politics is usually messier than this. Like Obama's hope, the joy that Harris has patented cannot last. But if Chicago is any guide, it stands a good chance of reaching November intact. So, Ed, talk to us a little bit more about this piece, because you're right. I mean, there are so many Democrats who were, frankly, really worried about her in the first year or so of her time as vice president. Some even speculated that Joe Biden should think about moving her from the ticket. And she certainly found her voice over abortion rights in the wake of the Dobbs decision, but still very, very few saw this coming.
Yeah, and it was probably unfair, a lot of the commentary on her performance as vice president. Vice president doesn't get to choose policy, doesn't get to make policy, only gets exposure when the main team in the West Wing allow them to have exposure. And she was given, kind of a poison chalice in terms of the Central America border challenge. But, we shouldn't forget that it was kind of consensus, conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C. and beyond, right up until a day or two before Biden stepped down, that Harris just didn't have what it takes to really take the mantle and be a great nominee. And that's been completely belied by everything that's happened since. Indeed, there was quite, I think, authoritatively sourced speculation that one of the reasons Biden was reluctant to step down was because he didn't have full faith in Kamala Harris's political skills. So this has been, it might only be 5 weeks and seem like 5 months, but this has been an extraordinary, rapid transformation, not just in our perception of her, but in her ability to show that she has got a really, really extraordinary ability to rally people, energize them, give them a degree of enthusiasm that this party has been sorely lacking for many years.
Yeah, and to Ed's point, until the final days of Biden remaining at the top of the ticket, some of his closest advisors didn't think the vice president could do it. And only in that last 48 hours or so was there new polling that showed that she was doing better.
Yeah, it was part of the reticence about him not stepping down at all, right? That perhaps because she didn't have what it takes. Lauren, you were in Chicago all last week. We were all there. And, it's undeniable. The enthusiasm and the unity was extraordinary. The vibes were great. It was interesting reading Peggy Noonan, though, this weekend. And she said at the end of her editorial, this will be, in the end, a policy election. When we get into the policy stage of this and Kamala Harris starts getting pressed more on policy, whether it's on the economy or whether it's on immigration, do you think that she's going to have a trickier time kind of as we move from vibes to substance around policy issues?
Well, I'll address that, but I got to respond to Ed Luce, who I respect enormously. But, I think there was also a real split in Washington between, frankly, a lot of the male pundits and women, including African-American women, who've been saying for a long time that the vice president was being underestimated. And that was part of the controversy that emerged when David Ignatius wrote his piece calling on the president to step down, but then completely overlooking Vice President Harris as the stand-in. And I think for a lot of women who've been watching her, we recognize that she was imperfect and that she was in an extremely difficult job. But I think it's not fair to say that everyone in Washington thought that she was not up to it. I think there was a real gender divide there. And I'll tell you that Black women who know her have been in her corner for a very long time, including people like Donna Brazile and others who were very, very angry that so much of the pundit class was not taking her seriously and saw that as bias. Now to the policy piece. Look, I think I'm not sure I agree with this idea that, this is necessarily the policy election. And I say this because I think Americans do understand these very fundamental differences between Harris and Trump on core policy issues. I mean, they hit on it quite a lot during the convention. Obviously, it was much more about sort of personal story and values. But certainly when it comes to issues like Roe, I think that's why you heard J.D. Vance yesterday, trying to claim that the Trump administration would veto an abortion ban, which is hard to see as credible given the history of this administration. I do think she is going to. We're already seeing some evidence of some pushback on policy. Yesterday, Tom Cotton was talking about a vote that she took around private health insurance. I am quite sure we're going to hear more about that. But I don't know. I mean, Obama. Can you remember details about Obama's policy leading into his election in 2008? I don't. I think what we remember was the hope message, which in fact did endure. And by the way, she has a shorter runway. Americans start voting early in September in some states, and that was very different in 2016. So I'm not saying she doesn't need to talk about policy, but I also do think that those who say that the broader messages about hope and joy can't sustain, I'm not sure I buy that.
Katie, I certainly agree with Lauren. I think that people that underestimated the vice president just had never really watched what she was doing, because she was all over the country, even as vice president, working at various constituencies, working with them for the president. She was vice president. She came to every convention that National Action Network had, NAACP, all of us had. And Donna Brazile and others were right when they raised this argument about how they were leaving out of the conversation. She was really supportive of the base that was supporting President Biden. But I think that the other thing that a lot of people are missing that I want your thoughts on is that with all of the enthusiasm, look at the numbers of volunteers they signed up last week. And I spoke yesterday at her alma mater, Howard University. I saw young people there signing up and doing things that I had never seen in Washington, D.C. If they build an infrastructure to the campaign that absorbs a lot of this enthusiasm, yes, they may drop 1 or 2 points from the bump from the convention, but they will have an infrastructure that can catch that and keep it moving, something that I think people are missing, like they were missing the charisma of Kamala Harris.
Yeah, there were reports over the weekend as well. There have been so many members of Congress who have wanted to become surrogates that they've now had to say, listen, we don't have enough public-facing roles for everybody who wants to take part in this campaign as well. You're right on the students issue, too, because we knew even when she was vice president, before she had the abortion platform as one of her part of her portfolio, she was getting long lines in colleges of kids wanting to turn out and speaking, to listen to her speak, and she was getting a great response for them. And that was something perhaps that was slightly missed. We were all focused on her 2020 campaign and how that didn't go very well, and the immigration part, but there were certainly parts of her portfolio and of her public performance that was going well.